we get started?
As it is for 5 years. So it's a split assignment.
You need to tell me.
We're going to let Brian take over?
Well, you can always be Paul. Paul
He does.
Okay. I'd like to call to order the planning board meeting of August 28th of the town of Falmouth.
All right, and I will call to order the August 28th meeting of the Zoning Board of Appeals.
Okay, the first thing on our agenda is a joint meeting with the Zoning Board of Appeals, and I'd like to turn it over to public comment, sorry, first. Public comment, yes.
Oh, so we have, we have comments.
Well, right.
A couple comments. First, so we're here to recognize Brian Curry on his years of service to the town. So I'm Dylan Fernandez, state representative, and it's an honor to be here today to recognize Brian, especially because he doesn't want to be recognized. And Brian is often the first to deflect credit and so often points to others and gives them credit for his accomplishments, but not today. Today we're going to fully recognize Brian. So Brian came to Falmouth in 1989, I believe. Brian and I we shared that in common. We came to Falmouth the same year. And through his and through his 28 years of service, he's really gained recognition not only locally but across the state for his work as a planner. He's in leadership of the APA, which just shows that how much his peers think about his work and his dedication to the job, and works to train others in the role as planners as well. And we're going to miss a lot about Brian, his intelligence, his thoughtfulness, but most of all probably his vision. And he's really been on the forefront of some of the biggest issues facing the town, whether it's helping secure block grants to help out with the big issue we have here around housing affordability, and securing block grants to help provide affordable homes for low and middle income people, or, well, there's been downtown revitalization. He was part of the group that spearheaded the project to move the utility poles out of downtown, expand the sidewalks, and really create our downtown that we love today, along with tackling one of the biggest issues facing the town, and that of climate change and coastal resiliency, and probably the biggest issue facing the town to generations to come, and working with the Woods Hole Group to create a plan. So thank you, Brian, for your years of service, and we're really going to miss you. And on the House side and on the Senate side, on the House we have a citation and to Brian Curry in recognition of your leadership and tireless dedication as Falmouth Town Planner for over 28 years. The entire membership extends its very best wishes and expresses the hope for future good fortune and continued success in all endeavors. Signed by Representative David Vieira, who unfortunately couldn't be here because he's on babysitting duty tonight, and then also by myself and Robert DeLeo, Speaker of the House. So thank you so much for your service. Really appreciate it. Stay up here. Okay.
Please forgive us. I know that you have a lot of business to do, but I think it was, and Tom reached out to us, and that this was important for us to take this opportunity to thank someone who has done so much for the town of Falmouth and has been that individual that has been behind the scenes and doesn't care about the pat on the back or the thank you, but this is our opportunity as a community to say thank you, as the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to say thank you for your, and Dylan put it best, your vision. Because as a planner, you have to have vision. You have to see what this community should look like. And having that vision many, many years ago has made Falmouth one of the most beautiful communities in Massachusetts. And you deserve a great deal of credit for that. And we are just incredibly thankful for your service and your time. And so on behalf of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts State Senate, along with my colleagues in the House, we really want to take this opportunity just to say, you have made an indelible mark here on this town of Falmouth, and to that, thank you very much. So. I have a citation as well. well, but I won't read it. It's a much nicer citation than it is. I always do that, I'm just kidding. But it reads very much the same, but signed by Karen Spilka, the Senate President, and myself. So with that, thank you so much. Please forgive us again for taking the time out, but as we all do think, it was well deserved. So thank you so much. Thank you so much. Tom, thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
Follow that.
Any-
I collect myself a bit. That was very nice, thank you, Senator and Representative. So I'll depart from some of my prepared notes here. My name is Brian Curry. Nowadays, I'm a planning consultant down in Plymouth, Massachusetts, but obviously you recall that for some time I was your town planner. It was my honor and privilege to serve this fine town. And I'm delighted to be back here tonight with old friends because we have an important topic to talk about. The topic is the recodification of the zoning bylaw. And that's the key word tonight, recodification. We're back on step somewhere around 21 out of maybe 101 steps that we're going to have to do here over the course of the next year or so, or two, perhaps. So I want to emphasize that it's really a start. It's been a longer process, but we're really going to be starting a dialogue tonight here. It's going to start with recodification. I'd like to just digress a bit, go back through a little bit of history, how we got here tonight, for the benefit of the new board members, some of the old board members, and the public that might be watching here again tonight. It began back in 2013. It was the April town meeting. It allocated about $35,000 for the purposes of recodification of the zoning bylaw. And one of the first things we did about a year or so later, 2014, is we hired General Code publishers out of New York, and they performed what's known as a legal and editorial analysis of the zoning bylaw for us. And what that did was sort of take the bylaw apart, both procedurally and substantively, and come back with whether deficiencies there might have been or improvements that might have been suggested. It was a 40-page report, and it was obvious to us at that time that the resources that town meeting graciously offered us were not going to be able to sustain the level of effort. So this board and this board, these boards together made some decisions. And one of the decisions was to start with a recodification process. One of the words, key words, I'll harken back to it a couple of times, is that we wanted to be more user-friendly, not for the arcane use of some technical boards, but we wanted the public to be able to pick up the bylaw, say I live here, I want to put in, say, a home occupation, and I won't have to go through a painstaking process to find out what it is, at least basically, I have to do that. So in about 2016, after we had the analysis done by General Code, we hired Bob Ritchie and Bob Mitchell to start the process of recodification. And you may recall back in May of 2017, they came back with their memorandum, their first memorandum that came up with a framework. And that framework was discussed throughout the summer by these boards and the public. And it was agreed upon back in August of 2017 that this was the framework we're going to pursue as we move forward with the recodification process. And that's what Bob and Bob have been doing since then. They've sort of been populating that framework that was agreed to by the boards with the current language that exists today. With some suggested deletions or amendments that are more ministerial in nature, or it may have to have some more substantive discussions, and they're embedded in the document you'll see here tonight. Again, I want to emphasize tonight is the beginning of a process. We envision many work sessions, or several work sessions with these boards to delve through some of the policy and substantive questions that are going to confront you. But that's not for tonight. You have a lot of information here tonight. Don't try to digest it all at one big gulp because it's not going to work. we will have follow-up discussions. So I'm going to ask the board to do something I've often asked them to do in the past. Okay, we're going to try to listen tonight. There's a lot of information for you. We're here to help you. But let's start with listening. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to turn the dais over to Mr. Mitchell.
Mr. Mitchell.
Thank you, Brian. Good evening, all. Planning board, zoning board, town manager, town attorney, everyone else in the audience, select board, Sari. It's great to be here. Bob Ritchie is my partner in this project. And as Brian mentioned, we started a year ago with getting the organizational framework agreed to, and based on that organizational framework, you will see what we've been doing for the past year on this. Brian's correct. While the contract and the scope is for a recodification of the bylaw, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in depth, there were some additional tasks that we were asked to look at that were more substantive in nature. And those included the non-conforming section of the bylaw that needed significant look at, both in terms of being updated, being expanded to cover issues that have come out of court cases and the statutes, and to try to write it in a way that reflected what the town actually wants in the way of regulations regarding non-conforming uses, structures, and lots. And you'll see that as the term. One of your bylaw sections actually, I think it says exempt uses, that then deals with non-conforming. But exempt uses is not really the term that's used either in the statute or by the courts. And so we wanted to, as part of the whole work we're doing, we want to make sure we have the bylaw using the correct terminology that reflects statutes and court decisions. So that's one of the major sections we looked at and have redone. The second is definitions. We were asked to look at the definition section of the bylaw, get it better organized, look at what definitions are in there. One of the characteristics of your bylaw is that you often have the same topic scattered all over the bylaw. And so part of what our job is to try to start aggregating the like topics so help people more easily find their way through the bylaw, find what they're looking for, navigate the bylaw. So the definition section was, and then the other big one was the zoning districts and the uses. And as you know, the uses in the current bylaw are not in tabular form, and they are not even in alphabetical form. So one of the simplest, easiest ways to help people find things in the bylaw is to put them in alphabetical order. And that's what we've been doing. And as you see from the materials that has been submitted, we have been creating tables for the different zoning districts you have to help people, staff, boards, citizens, attorneys, much more easily find out what uses are allowed, where, how they're allowed, not allowed special permit planning board, special permit zoning board. Just looking at it, one quick shot, you look at it, it's there. You don't have to work your way through lots of paragraphs. Your bylaw has a lot of good sections in it, has a lot of good material in it. You have a number of updated sections, medical marijuana and wind energy and other sections. That doesn't need really a lot of work on them, because so those kinds of sections we would just be moving over into the new format. The goal, I think as Brian mentioned, is to create a solid foundation for a new bylaw, not only for this recodification process, but going forward as you deal with more substantive policy issues. that you can incorporate those into a well-organized, more easily used bylaw. That includes making the bylaw and the language and the text easier to find, easier to read, easier to understand. It includes providing what I call visual cues as to how to navigate a bylaw. And visual cues includes everything from the fonts and the titles and the indentation and a consistent numbering system. You have a pretty good numbering system in the bylaw that you have now, but it kind of goes off the cliff here and there because the numbers don't go in order, or you have a lot of numbers that aren't used in sequence. And but for the most part, we're going to incorporate the numbering system, the 240-1, 240-2, 240-2.2 system that's already there. So that part will be mostly familiar. So we're not obviously rewriting the whole bylaw. As I mentioned, we're trying to organize topics into the new articles that you have, a list of the new articles. And by the way, the Roman numerals are gone. It's Article 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, a lot of people can figure out what Roman numeral I and double, but when it gets to, MCLVII or CXL, it's not many people are that conversant in Latin anymore. So again, it's part of making it much simpler, much more, conversant in the simple English language. The articles are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, that way. Language. One of the biggest problems of your bylaw is language. Bob's going to point out we actually had to create a code to address all the various issues with language. And we'll get into that a little bit more. So even when you have the substance, it's pretty good. The language is a problem. And we'll tell you why and how we've started to deal with those. Not everywhere, obviously, but in many parts of the bylaw. The other goal here, which is not as one that's so identified. I mean, we interviewed staff, we interviewed people outside town hall back when we started to get a sense of how people felt about the bylaw, what the problems were, what was good, what wasn't working. And some of the things I just mentioned, the language, how hard it is to find things are scattered, they came up over and over again. But one of the things doesn't usually come up, but this is from our experience, Bob and I's experience. One of the other goals here, as part of building this foundation, is to build a foundation where language is precise, language is accurate, punctuation is accurate, grammar is correct. Now, if you do that, it makes it easier to read and understand a bylaw. But if you do that, it also can protect you if you end up in a court of law. It's not that unusual for towns to end up in court, and the decision of the court is not based on the substance of the matter, it's based on the language of the bylaw. And when that comes up, it's pretty frequent that the town loses the case because they weren't paying attention to the preciseness of the language they're putting in the bylaw. They weren't paying attention to the punctuation. It's remarkable how cases can rise or fall on a simple comma, whether the comma is there or the comma is not there. Some towns have found out the hard way that they should have paid a lot more attention to what they were writing. They thought they wrote this. And the judge said, no, you didn't. You wrote the the opposite of this. And of course, they were trying to establish a process or establish a regulation when they wrote X, only to get into court and have a judge say, well, you should have checked with Webster's because It's not X, it's the opposite of X. So one of the things that's important to us in our work and what we're doing here is to really focus in on the language, the words, how they're structured, how they're laid out, whether it's tables or lists, and you can see that. All of that helps to protect you if, in fact, you might end up in court on a decision. So part of that solid foundation is a solid language foundation that is important. So we're going to provide show you all an overview of how we got to where we are tonight, how we got to the drafts that you have. We'll also talk about the sections that we were asked to look into in more detail, the definitions, the non-conforming uses, structures, lots, and the use tables. And again, as Brian said, and I will re-emphasize that, we are at the draft stage. These are works in progress. We certainly are going to be working with you and the staff and the boards over the next few months to polish these up, to respond to your questions, to get you to a point where you have a draft of the bylaw that you feel is ready to go to town meeting, with the aim being spring town meeting. We also have, and you might not be expecting this, but we have homework for you. So, as I said, these are drafts, so we want feedback from you. And one of the reasons that we were asked to look into things like the use tables and creating use tables, look into the use districts, looking into the definitions, was there was a feeling that those were some of the most problematic areas of the bylaw. Okay, well, we've started the draft. You have those drafts. What's missing? You know, for all of you to take a look at the definition draft. Are there definitions that are missing that we should add in? For the use tables, it's interesting when we do bylaws for towns that are like Falmouth, that have their uses in paragraphs and not in tables. It's when you put it in the table, you have a quick snapshot that gives you, well, this use is allowed here and not here. And that might have come from two different sections of the bylaw. Well, now it's in the table together. And it's like, well, wait a minute, why is that? Why do we allow it here? Why not here? Why is it a special permit here? And whatever. So we're going to ask you to take a good look at the tables and see what pops up and say, wait a minute, I didn't know that, or wait a minute, that's a red flag, or something is missing. The other thing, and if you read the documents, you'll notice they have some footnotes. So we have questions for you in the documents. Some of those questions are, even doing a recodification, you can't avoid crossing into policy questions. Now, we're not here, and we're not, part of our project is not to get into policy discussions and policy decisions, but we've either because of something we've seen or something that Brian or Attorney Duffy, who we've been in a lot of contact with and they've been tremendous help on this, have pointed out some of your bylaw sections that go way back. And maybe they're not up to date, maybe they've been superseded, maybe they need to be revised, maybe they need to be deleted, but those are all policy questions. But they're footnoted in the document. So you'll see footnotes that say policy question. That's for the town, obviously. We're not looking for any answers tonight, and for the recodification, we're not looking for answers at all, but maybe that's phase 2, or however you decide to address those. But, you know, that's for your information. We have other questions that are footnoted. Some are not really policy questions, but really we thought, this is something the board should think about and ultimately decide. So I think with that, I'll try to look, excuse me, I'll turn it over to Bob Ritchie. We have a short PowerPoint. I think Bob's got it set now, so it only talks about Falmouth zoning bylaw. His summer vacation pictures are no longer in this PowerPoint, so, you know. So Bob,
Good evening. On the way down here, my wife joined me on the trip to Falmouth. She knew I was coming here, and she insisted on coming. She loves this place. She asked me what we're going to be talking about tonight, and I said, well, Bob and I have been hired more or less as the architects and the contractors of a new house that the town wants to build. And it's a new house. It's got to replace the old house. The old house, which is your old bylaw, has a lot of different rooms with a lot of different functions and a lot of different furniture. But as the architect and the contractor for a new structure to which all of the old furniture and furnishings have to be transferred, we have to be careful to make certain that every piece of furniture from the old house goes into the appropriate room in the new house. And I know analogies are kind of simplistic, but it's a valid metaphor for the kind of thing we're doing. The word recodification suggests the reality that when we're finished, there'll be a book of new laws that whole and entire has to be acted upon by the town's legislative body, town meeting, and then it goes to the Attorney General for the review of the bylaws' consistency with the Constitution and the laws of the Commonwealth. Frank and I go back a long time in doing that, and the whole book goes before the Attorney General for a final look to make certain that what we're doing is accurate. Do you have the clicker, Bob? No. So, in the process of mapping and migrating all of the good stuff that's in your bylaw now, that some prior town meeting that was worth having as part of your legal code, we need to be sure that we address it, look at it, change it as necessary, tag it, box it, move it, and install it. And we had to be particularly careful to have an audit trail so that we didn't miss anything. The mover doesn't want to leave a chair by the side of the road. And the new house may need something that the old house didn't have. So we're going to have to buy some furniture on the route and bring some old stuff back. So what we're going to try to do tonight is to walk you through a couple of stages that we processed our assignment. And the first one is to take a look at, when we look at text, we have a little checklist of what we were reading. Is it ambiguous? Should we ask town council to check for consistency and conformity with some provision of the state law? We don't want to help author a text that's going to be defeated later by the Attorney General for some inconsistency. So we want to make certain that the document has terms that are internally inconsistent, so that you don't use the same term in different ways, or two terms for the same thing. So as Bob indicated before, internal consistency and conformity to state law was two of the things that we wanted to be certain we addressed. Sometimes judgments are prescribed in the bylaw, but there are no criteria or standards by which some official or body of the town has to comply. So if there was a deficiency because criteria were not stated, we'll either point that out, offer you some, or ask the town in its homework to come up with those criteria and standards that would be useful. We mark terms that are accompanied by a definition. That suggests that we should move that term to a place where all definitions are going to be found. Grammar. We found many places in which the grammar needed to be changed. The presence or absence of a comma alters the scope of the term that it applies to. So we were particularly attentive to grammar, syntax, and style to make certain that we gave you a product that is readable. Sometimes provisions are incomplete, and we had to mark those. Sometimes we found LOC is inappropriately located in the bylaw, or located in so many places they needed to be aggregated in order to get some understanding. Sometimes we found places where some essential elements were missing. And if they were dictated by state statute, we added them, or we pointed that out so that in further deliberation, the town can come up with the right terms. Sometimes it's just a question of moving text. MT is multiple terms for the same thing. Sometimes provisions have an intent that covers way more than it need to address the issue. That would be an over-inclusive provision that we would recommend narrowing. If you jump to the bottom under UT, you see UIC, an under-inclusive term. And therefore, we would suggest that it be expanded to cover all of the cases that the legislative body, the town meeting, might have had in mind when they adopted it. So we had other things like questionable paraphrases of statutes. We prefer to stick to the language of the statute. You paraphrase at your peril, and if we do paraphrase, we have to be particularly careful that we don't do so with an error. QLEG is something that will implicate Frank Duffy and his team, because we want to be sure that we don't do anything that has some questionable legality. The courts make decisions that compel us to change our laws from time to time. And so that's an issue that we paid attention to when we did our first read. As Bob indicated, you have lots of sections in your bylaw that have hundreds and hundreds of words in a single sentence. It's just not readable. By the time you get to the end of the sentence, you would get the verb, you don't know what the subject was. And you might have had a half a dozen modifiers. So we try to break those big sentences into small parts with lots of periods, and preferentially with a list. Sometimes terms are used that are not defined, in case we made a list of terms that we ought to find in the definition section, but simply not in your initial bylaw. And sometimes it's just plain vague, and we thought that some clarification might be useful. So, do they have the memo? They do. Okay. This little PowerPoint will talk you through the list that appears on page 2 of this memo, which is under category 1, the work undertaken on the process so far. And as indicated, the first step was to start with what you had back in 2016. So this is a picture of the first page of your bylaw. That was the grist for our mill. The next step was we took that bylaw and broke it into 47 discrete files. And each file was an article of your bylaw. And we've saved it as a separate patient on the table to be operated on. If you see on the left, you will see the references as they appear in the table of contents of your current bylaw. And on the right, with new designations using Arabic numerals, you will also see that there are 2 little number signs next to the article. That is a code that we use to indicate that we have scrutinized every word and phrase in the source article section to confirm that it had actually been embedded into the first draft of the recode. And so you will see that we went through all 47 articles of your current bylaw to make that confirmation. The framework that we worked on is to take 47 articles and convert them to 14 logically connected segments of the total bylaw. And it is within this framework that we began to map and migrate the provisions of the old bylaw to the new one. This is a snapshot of one of those files. This happens to be Article 1. And we take the file that we saved as Article 1, and we operated on it in the following way. We adopted a color scheme to indicate text that is going to be taken out of here and brought to someplace else. And you can see by the 4 separate colors, these things had a source and a target. And it indicates those little red marks where we're going to send it for the new template. And I think this is one of the bases upon which we finally put those 2 little number signs next to the article in our computer to make certain that we've read it. Every single section, paragraph, phrase has been color-coded and copied with the same color code to the new bylaw. And we're up to version 11 of the new code. And the version 11, you will see the same color coding, except there'll be different, the color patterns will be different because we've aggregated them in a logical place. So here is a picture of Article 1 in the new code, and you will see that Article 240-1, where it came from in the old code, 240-2 is authority. That is new. We created that because it didn't appear in the old code. 240-3 came from 240-2 in the existing code. So we needed to be sure that we left cookie crumbs to follow. So when Bob and I go back to Boston and Amherst respectively, you'll be able to pick up what we did and follow how we did it. And you don't want to have to call us up. We'd like to leave you with the tools to carry forward on your own. So this is a snapshot of the way the new bylaw might start to shape up as to appearance. This was cleansed of its color shading just for presentability. And this is just a note to show that we were careful to track the source and target of all phases of the old bylaw. And again, we double-checked and reconfirmed that we didn't miss anything. We don't want pieces of furniture falling off the moving truck on the day you, as the owner of the new house, move in. So that's what we're trying to do here. In order to be completely sure, we were working with an original source that had full integrity. We had to review all of the town meeting actions from 213 to 218 to make certain that necessary changes of the text that we were using, that first slide, the bylaw that we got, 2016, we wanted to be sure that anything town meeting may have done in the interim had been taken into account and those changes reflected in the text that we were putting together. Bob indicated that there were three things that we were asked to pay particular attention to on a substantive level. One is definitions, and I think we talked about that. By all accounts, district and use tables, I can't tell you how much I admire the work of Bob Mitchell in putting that stuff in tables. It was heavy lifting, and he's done an incredible job. I have to say it's easy to follow, and if I can follow it, I think anybody can. Non-conforming structures, uses, and lots. Even the best lawyers, Frank and I will testify that we don't completely understand this, but we've done the best job we can to make certain that your provisions, the ones that you had, are brought over and are as consistent with state law that we can make them. So we did pay attention to those. This is how definitions will start to look in the new framework. And we have, these are color-coded, and they follow the new numbering scheme. We, as Bob indicated, the alphanumerics and the nesting of provisions will be done very carefully. If you notice over here, some definitions are part of a cluster having to do with the same general topic. Other ones are not part, they sort of stand alone, so they are in white. But anything that's gray is a sub-definition of some general topic, so that somebody reading the bylaw, needing to know the meaning of a term, can go back into the right section of the definitions, in the many, many pages of definitions, and get to the right place quickly. This is a glimpse of the kind of work that Bob did on districts and uses. It's an amazing bit of work, and I think that you will, when you see the full document, appreciate the ease with which somebody reading the bylaw can actually locate what they're looking for, rather than today having to plow through dense text to find out the same things that are being said with many, many words that could be said more easily and more effectively by a place on the table in a single letter. So this is perhaps one of the major achievements of the recodification that we've been assigned to help you do. As an illustration of how we took, dense text and put it into readable form, Bob actually counted up, there's 167 words there, and here we have just 7 items. Says the same thing, but you can read that and not get lost in the weeds. Nonconformities, there is no more impenetrable text in the general laws than Chapter 48, Section 6, which is referenced here. And the bylaw that you had actually was a reasonably decent paraphrase of it. But what we did was we took the text from the statute and at our paraphrased it to some extent by splitting it up into separate parts. It says the same thing, but in a readable form. We left this text in here. Oops, I missed something. Here you go. Yeah, we left that shaded text in to illustrate how the statute would word it and how we then re-rendered that into comprehensible format. Bob mentioned the list of deletions that were asked to assemble so that when you read the bylaw and are looking for a term that you thought was there, you'll find it in this table. That one? Okay.
Just to add a comment about the deletions, we wanted to track, again, we're trying to track everything. So we wanted to track those sections or small sections or even words or sentences that are proposed, and I'll explain that a little bit, for deletion and give you the reason. So, you know, the 3 columns, what section in the current bylaw, what the language is, why it's proposed for deletion. Now, we work very closely with Brian on this and with Frank too on some of these, because some of these are obvious for deletion. One that comes to mind that we talk about all the time is you have a definition of ice house, which of course is a kind of an archaic definition, which we always find in bylaws. But the term ice house is not used anywhere in your bylaw except the definitions. So you don't really need to define terms you don't use. So that's an easy one to say. That probably should be deleted. And then there's some language we found in the bylaw that actually expired and sometime in the past. Well, if it's expired, it needs to come out of the bylaw. Part of this is sort of decluttering the bylaw. I mean, one of the reasons people have expressed difficulties in finding it because they felt the bylaw, both the way it was formatted now and because there's a lot of unnecessary language in there, it's kind of cluttered, and it makes that harder to do, so we're uncluttering that. Some of these sections require probably further discussion, and I know because they're based on some issues related to, well, this has been superseded, or this was adopted 25 years ago and it's never been used, those kinds of things. So that's an important document, and we will continue to add to that as we go through the entire bylaw, so you will know what we're showing as is proposed to come out of the bylaw and why, and then ultimately you can decide one way or another to what you want to keep or not keep or change into the final draft.
On the category of uncluttering the bylaw, if you look at your existing bylaw, you will see one or more references to the actions taken by various town meetings over past years. You will not find these in the recode, mainly because we thought, in the interest of decluttering the bylaw and making it understandable and readable, is this the best place to record your legislative history? In the age of computers, no, it isn't. All you'd need to do is to have a way of tracing it back. So by having a document, having a version of your code that continues using sent to and received from as the method of tracking, you should be able to answer the question, where did this come from? And find that it was as it appeared in the 2016 version of your bylaw. So that's one change that we made, and we discussed this with the planning staff before we proceeded to purge the final document of actual references to the legislative history.
On that topic, 2 things. One, that was one of the things that I think everybody, or certainly everybody but maybe one person or so that we talked to and interviewed with, that was like the first thing they told us. The listing of all the town meeting information made it difficult to read the bylaw. It cluttered the bylaw. People didn't know whether it was part of the bylaw or not part of the bylaw. So that recommendation pretty much came from everybody. Now, you know, Bob mentioned that we have in our documents, in our computers, we have retained all of that information. And just to offer up somebody, and I found this, I looked at it again this week, it's unidentified, so I don't know where this came from. It came from someplace in Town Hall. Somebody has actually been tracking town meeting changes in just a single document, and it went back to the 70s, you know, the town meeting on this date in 1979, and Article 12 changed this part of the bylaw. So you have a list, and that could be kept up to date. Some towns keep that list, and then while they don't officially incorporate it into the bylaw, they put it at the end of the bylaw. So if people want to see the list of what town meeting changed when, it's in sequence from the dates of town meeting, so they have that as part of it. So that's one way to keep it up to date and to keep tracking the changes. There are some other ways that towns do it. A lot of towns don't do it at all, but you know, it's up to each individual town. But so that's why we kind of took that track, because we were asked to by so many people. But again, how you want to keep tracking it, we've got you set up to this point, and to go forward, there's different ways of how the town wants to keep track of it, and that will be one of the decisions down the road for the town. So we still have other work that we're working. We still have other work that we're working. Oops, let me get to the mic. We still have other work that we're doing. And so this is part of the contract. So the drafts you have tonight, obviously, as I mentioned, these are works in progress, and you know, working with us and the staff and the two boards. We need to, you know, polish those up and get to a point where those are in good shape. So the other sections of the bylaw, and there are a lot of other sections, we are not charged with going into substantive reviews of those. However, aside from moving them into the right places, we are doing language reviews so that we can clean up the language with, you know, the Bob had 15 different problems of language. We want to try to give you the entire bylaw with a clean language review. So we'll be doing that. You'll see all those drafts, and then each one of those new articles will be incorporated into the framework and the format of it. And so that's something we're working on, and that will be next. As part of the scope, we were asked to do a diagnostic of the bylaw, and you've already heard tonight some of the things we found. Sometimes we do that at the beginning of the process. We kind of take a look at the bylaw and talk, and we do our interviews in Town Hall and outside of Town Hall, and then based on that information, we provide a diagnostic. Now, the more we started looking at your bylaw, the more we started talking to Brian and Frank, the more we found we really needed to dive much deeper into this bylaw before we did a diagnostic, because we were finding a variety of issues and questions and problems, and a lot of them, as we said, you know, kind of relate to language rather than the big picture things. But we decided that we wanted to give you a diagnostic that was more comprehensive if we did it at this stage of the process rather than at the beginning of the process. And so therefore you'd have a roadmap for the future, for, you know, the next phase, the phase after that, where you'd have more detailed information about issues and topics and questions that you probably should consider fixing or answering or deciding going forward. So we will have that diagnostic for you as well in the next month or so. Well, in any project, you have to finalize the drafts. So, again, working with staff and the boards, we want to finalize a bylaw to give you a bylaw. So that's it. One of the things you probably noticed in the drafts is that a lot of times when the draft in a particular section refers to section, it says see section 240, or see Article 2, Article 12, or see section 240-25 or whatever, and it's in red now, and sometimes there's little X's next to it. That's our internal code where we highlighted those numbers, because those numbers are going to change based on the new format. So once we've got the new all of the new material, this B, once we've got that down, we will then know what all the numbers are in the bylaw, and we will go back and cross-reference to the correct numbering as we cross-reference from one section of the bylaw to another. So that's just our internal code to highlight. That's part of the task at that. And then we are going to provide training sessions for the staff, boards, whoever, about what's in, how to work, how to navigate the bylaw, the new bylaw. What's in the bylaw, and how it best can be used in your day-to-day work, in your board meetings. So that's kind of the end result. Once we've got the bylaw, then we can provide a working session with you on that issue as well, just to help familiarize everybody with the bylaw. So, I mean, do people have some questions right now, just in general questions, rather not right in the weeds yet, but we can, otherwise we'll. Yes.
Just on the open items you just listed, what kind of time frame do we have for those being completed?
So over the next 4 months. So we'll be producing documents every month, September, October, November, and then trying to have everything finished up by end of December. I thought that was based on discussions with, what you're backing up from town meeting time, what you would need when. So it will be a pretty active 4 months. And if that's not correct, then we should know that now.
Hopefully this is not in the weeds. Did you say you went back from 2013 to 2018? Seems like 40, 50 years before that might be uncovered.
Well, we went back, we originally were going to go back to just 2016 because the bylaw we were given, we had a February 2016 edition of the bylaw. Then we got a September 2016.
You get the same thing. It's confusing.
Yeah, there's a lot of confusion about having an up-to-date, accurate bylaw. Okay? That's been, quite frankly, a problem, trying to get to an up-to-date, accurate bylaw. And this is kind of a weird example. We were in a meeting earlier this summer where we discovered that the September issue was, let me reverse this, the February issue of the bylaw, the edition of the bylaw, was more up-to-date than the September. Somehow, something got left out of the September that was in the February. So trying to make sure we've got everything in the bylaw that, has been passed by town meeting. But it's not in the contract, we don't have the time to go back 40 years. Somebody in the town's welcome to do that, but that's not part of this process. And so we did extend it back to 2013 because we just wanted to have double and triple checked because we were concerned about having an updated bylaw and we weren't sure how things were being changed back to a few more years back.
When you mentioned that, that's why I think you do need some kind of an inclusion list for the legislative history somewhere, even if it's in the back of the book?
Right, right.
Because there are cases where you may have, somebody might have missed something that was on the vote, which just isn't included. And I just one question on the definition. So if I was looking up the definitions, I would need to know the category?
Well, one of the things we've done, it was on one of the slides, is if something, if somebody was, so say you wanted to look up farm, you'd go to F, right? In F, it would say farm, see agriculture and farm-related terms. And it would send you to the block of agriculture and A. So something that's obvious, we put those, we put something in to tell people where to navigate to, okay? And the reverse has happened. I'm not sure, I think, I'll have to go back and look, but we aggregated restaurant-related terms. I think one of the terms defined now is fast food restaurant, and then everything else was under restaurant. So if you went to R, which is, you know, where you'd go to look at restaurants, you might not know that there was another definition of restaurant. So we've pulled those kinds of things together, and again, tried to add, for logical ones, see this aggregated term.
What's the process for board members at this point to provide feedback? So if there's substantive comments, I understand you don't really want to get into the weeds tonight. Should we be sending those through the town? I guess what's our involvement at this point?
I'll give you my take on that, but you know, the town. So yes, throughout this process, as you review these things, if you have something you want to really make sure we know, and it helps us if you start feeding us your comments and thoughts and not wait till, you know, next meeting or 2 meetings. So it has to go through one, it's by contract, we go through one person. It was Brian, now it's Tom. So, and then it'll get to us. Obviously, we'll have some time tonight to start talking about some of the bigger questions and whatnot. We'll be back multiple times. One of the things that we often do, I think I already mentioned this to somebody, a couple of people probably. One of the things that we often do with towns that we're working with, and either working with the planning board or the zoning board or both, or some towns have a zoning review committee made up of, you know, various people. We like to have a work session with them, open meeting, but actually sitting around, you know, the conference table where we can really kind of go through things in more detail, and we can ask you detailed questions, you can ask us detailed questions, you can make decisions that say, do it this way, write it that way, take this out, move it here. That's really helpful. And so we offer that up. I mean, you can talk to the staff and see what you think about that. But, you know, so it's a combination of feeding Tom comments, you know, and us having dialogues at different meetings going forward. So, okay.
Jerry?
One last question.
Sure.
I think. A couple of months ago, I think we went through proposing definitions. I remember we had a discussion of new definitions around, one of them was energy-related, not just solar or wind. And some of us forwarded, suggested new definitions or aggregation of some of these terms. Should we assume you have that? To the best of our recollection, try to get it back and send it through channels? Well,
take a look at what you have.
You don't have it?
Okay, then we want it.
Okay.
So then, you know, take a look at it. And I will just note for the record, back last year when we were asking for comments, and we got a memo from the zoning board, actually, and one of the things you asked for was to add a definition for nuisance, and that's in there. So take a look at it and see if it does what you
No,
hoped
I just meant that one thing that stuck in my mind.
Yeah. well, that's the kind of thing. But I will say, we'll certainly collect comments, and we will review them. We'll put them into some kind of matrix of, who this comment came from so-and-so. And because, what happens sometimes is somebody says, oh, you should take X out, and then somebody else says, oh, X, I really like X. You want to keep that in. So, we can't just make changes based on one person saying doing that and one person saying doing this. Ultimately, I'm assuming this will be a planning board article at town meeting, so ultimately, there'll have to be some consensus by the board about what you want in, but we will present to you the kinds of comments and changes. Some of those are easy. Maybe you find something technically wrong, or there's a word incorrect, or there's a word missing. We're just going to fix those. But other things we're going to present back to the boards. This is what we heard. This is the ones we fixed. These are the ones we think you all have to make the decision on. So, yeah.
Did you deal with the restaurant classification matrix?
There is a footnote in somewhere in there. The whole restaurant thing. I finally called Brian and said, "This is just driving me nuts." So there's a footnote in there that says, really, the town really needs to step back and take a comprehensive look at how you're dealing with restaurants, and think about, what it is you want to do and how best it can be written. As I mentioned, when you put, for a lot of reasons, and that's one of them, but I'm going to give you an example here. As I mentioned, when you put things into tables, you find that, whoops, I didn't know it was that way. So in one of the districts, and it may be the business district, or it might be the industrial district, you have category permitted uses, and there's some restaurants listed. In some of the zones, it's just permitted, and some it's not allowed. And the different restaurants, class 1, class 2, class 3, and then there was one odd restaurant. Other restaurants. Okay, what's an other restaurant? It's not defined. It's like, who knows what another restaurant is? And then in that same zoning district, under special permits, you have another paragraph now that we put into table for restaurants, and the two restaurant sections don't agree with each other. This one says the restaurant's allowed by right in zone X. This one says the restaurant requires a special permit in that same zone. Well, obviously you didn't intend to do that, but because of the way your bylaw is written, nobody picked up on that. But when you put it into tables, those kinds of things jump out. So yes, restaurants is definitely got to be on your list for phase 2 to deal with.
Thank you. Yes, Charlotte.
Should we assume that the articles that we don't have in front of us right now, 5, 9, 11, 12, 13, that they are forthcoming?
That would be a great assumption, because it would be a true assumption. Most of those articles, as I mentioned, are the ones where we're not going in and rewriting them substantively. The 3 we've already talked about are the ones we were contracted to go into. Those articles we'll be looking at, again, organization, where they're located and how they're numbered, and then language cleanup. And then, so those we put off because we wanted to spend the time on the more substantive issues, but those you'll be getting over, as I said, over the next 4 months. Those are part of the drafts that will be coming your way.
Jim, if I could, one other question. Are we to assume that there would be cross indexes also? That in addition to the charts that you provided, the tabs are terrific, that there'll be cross indexes also, so that if you were looking for a particular thing and which zone it could belong in, you could just go to that index? It would be like a comprehensive index across the different zones.
Well, that's an interesting question, and I think Bob might want to answer it, but let me just One of the unique things about your bylaw, and it's the way you do it, or I have done it, is in a lot of your uses, you have lots of standards and conditions for that particular use. And as you can see in the tables, we added the center column for standards and conditions. And that makes the tables much longer. A lot of towns don't have that, and so they put one matrix table for every zoning category and every use into one table. But we really weren't able to do that because of all the language that are in the standards. That I don't know, you'd have to use, I don't know, much bigger paper or something, or else have font of 6, which nobody could read. Some communities use an EndNote process where they have the table of just the zoning districts and the uses, and then those uses that have standards and conditions will have an EndNote, and then at the end of that table begins the EndNote. So the first use that has standard and conditions gets footnote or EndNote 1, and then 2, 3, and it all flows at the end of the table. So that way you can have the table all in the same place. That's another way of thinking about it. We were asked to do the tables by what's called underlying districts, your basic districts, agricultural, residential, industrial, business, public use, and marine districts. So that's one category. The second category is your overlay districts, coastal pond, watershed, accident prevention. So that's an entirely different type of district. So we were asked to do that way, and then subcategories do tables for agricultural districts, because you have multiple agricultural districts, you have multiple residential districts, you have multiple business. And so trying to fit all of that into an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper led to some compromises. We'll certainly, that's a question we'll have to think about and see if Bob has some ideas that he might be able to give you.
One thing to keep in mind is bylaws were written well before the computers were here. Communities are shifting to web-based versions of their laws, all right? And so one of the towns that I'm working on right now is making the recode include not only a table of contents, but also an associated table that is essentially an alphabetized index. So even though the definitions take one form, you can do an internal hyperlink to other portions of the text. So most people will be reading what we do online. Control F will find any term you want to look for. But you can help the process by having one or more ancillary tables that are basically indexed topics. And you can jump around with internal hyperlinks very creatively. So if you can imagine what you'd like to see, you can do that much more easily with contemporary digital tools than you could in the old-fashioned way, like as if it were a written book. People are going to buy the book. General Code does a really remarkable job using a book-based system. But when you shift to a digital-based system, opportunities for clarity and jumping around are much easier to accomplish. So that thought could be pursued and evolved to produce just the kind of ease of reading and shifting around that you're looking at. The town of Amherst is doing that right now with a companion list that is alphabetized digitally. It's great.
All board members all set? Tom, you got anything?
Only that I would take that sage advice, don't assume anything. If you've had a comment prior to and you didn't see it, please send them to me. I will forward them on to Bob and Bob, because it's just easier to have one portal than to have those coming in from all over the place. So as soon as I get something from you, something you've submitted prior to, and you want to send it back in, I don't think there's an issue with making sure that we didn't have anything fall off the moving truck. I'm happy to get those comments out to our consultants ASAP. And I think if the boards feel it would be constructive to have that open session, big table where we are geeking about zoning, I think that's a lot of benefit to the process.
So in summary, we've got 4 months, we're gonna be working through this, and we're gonna be going through all those items, marching down that list over the next 4 months, with culmination being completed in December in preparation for town meeting, if there is anything. Is that basically the plan?
That is the plan we were given by the town. So we'll spend a lot of time trying to make that happen. And we look forward to working with you all to get a great document for the town. And the final thing I want to say is, and I'll probably say this again, going back to my initial comments, we're trying to provide you with a solid foundation, a well-organized bylaw, a bylaw that has a really good framework and structure. Only you, well, not only you, but mostly you and others, can ensure that going forward, it stays that way. So as you go forward with amendments over the next years, quite frankly, you're going to have to think about not adding amendments the way the town has been doing it, because one of the reasons, I forgot how many articles you have.
47.
How many?
47.
47 articles. They just got added on. A lot of things got added on at the end, added on at the end, added on at the end. An article is an important lead heading for the big things, and everything else sits under it. And just one example, one of your articles, I don't know what the number is, has one item in the article, and that item is a single use, commercial recreation center. Why was that not just put into the use section of the bylaw? Well, I don't know, but that's the thing you really kind of have to stay vigilant on, that if you are changing uses, you put them into the use section. If you're changing the parking, put it into the parking section. If you're adding definitions, put them into the definition section. Don't just keep adding on, because 10 years from now, there'll be different consultants here trying to fix a bylaw that's got all these problems again. Because I know Bob and I won't be here in 10 years doing this again, so.
Yeah, if you buy a couch, don't put it in the kitchen.
Yeah. So, and that'll be part of, thinking when we get to, sort of the training about that, we'll certainly be happy to talk to you. Because we work with towns that do that make sure the bylaw stays, aside from the substance of amendments, they are actually fit into the correct place in the bylaw. And we can, certainly work with the town and town staff about different ways of making that happen. But
Okay. Well, thank you, Bob and Brian. This has been laid out the next 4 months with us. Terry, we're going to wrap it up. Are you hearing anything?
No, just on behalf of my board, I just want to say thank you for coming down and explaining the whole process to us, and we look forward to working with you in the next 4 months.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much.
We have a couple items.
Yeah, we're moving on with our agenda.
But if, I don't
Give
know.
guys a minute to, yeah,
Give
we'll
us
give
a
you,
minute.
we'll go into recess for like 3 minutes.
How are you?
Gentlemen, we need to move on.
More or less
We have
complete
further
knowledge.
agenda items. Sorry.
It'd be good to keep in mind when we read through it.
Okay.
The parts that I was reading, I thought it made it clearer.
Okay, I'd like to reconvene the meeting. The next item on the agenda is planning board discussion, the applicant Paul Dupuy, special permit application to adjust the boundaries on lots 31, 32, and 33, Adamancet Road, East Falmouth. And at this point, I am recusing myself, Pat, and you'll
Okay.
take over.
Okay, we have a decision here, a draft decision, and we'd like to read it. Bob,
What's that?
you want to read the draft decision?
Oh, the draft decision?
Make the motion, in other words.
Okay. Draft July 20th, 2018, Paul R. Dupuy Jr., Adamancet Road, special permit. I'm not going to read all those numbers. Motion that the planning board vote to approve the special permit application of Paul R. Dupuy Jr. under Article 14, Dimensional Regulations, Chapter 240 of the zoning bylaw of the town of Falmouth for a plan entitled Plan of Land Prepared for Paul R. Dupuy Jr., Adamancet Road, Hatchville, Falmouth, Massachusetts, being a redivision of lots 31, 32, and 33 as shown on Land Court Plan 23937G, prepared by BSS Design, dated May 11, 2018, scale 1 inch equals 40 feet, with the following findings and conditions. The applicant seeks a special permit under Section 24066C6 to allow for the adjustment of the lot lines of the following parcels: map numbers 1701016031, 1701016032, 1701016033, shown as lots 31, 32, and 33 on Land Court Plan 23937G, located at 95, 115, and 119 Adamancet Road, East Falmouth, Mass. This section of the bylaw states: any lot held in common ownership with any adjoining land as of 1 January 1981, not protected by subdivision C4 may, subsection C4 may apply for the planning board for a special permit to construct a single-family residence if the lots are on roads which have been constructed as of April 1st, 1982, in accordance with Chapter 305, the subdivision rules and regulations of the town of Falmouth. And if the lots are re-subdivided so that the total area of the commonly held lots, when divided by the number of building permits to be requested, results in an area of land per a single-family residence that equates at least 75% of the existing, that equals at least 75% of the existing requirements for that zoning district. The additional criteria specified in subsection C3 shall also be considered. In addition, the planning board may set aside one of the created lots as an open space lot as allowed under Mass General Law, Section 41, Section 81U, amended ATM 47-1986, Article 75. The site is located in an agricultural AGA zoning district and water resource protection district where the minimum required lot size is 80,000 square feet. The minimum required lot frontage is 150 lineal feet, and the minimum lot width is 200 lineal feet. The total area of the lots being re-subdivided is 198,721 square feet, including 11,800 square feet of wetland. Per the current plan referenced above, Adamancet Road was constructed prior to April 1st, 1982, and the lots are currently served by town water with the water main and hydrants installed by the federal government in 1997. There are currently 3 houses. The re-subdivision of the lots will place 1 house on each lot. Should I read all this?
I would not, frankly, try to go through that table.
Okay. The planning board finds that the total area of the proposed re-subdivided lots, 198,721 square feet, when divided by the number of single-family residents, contains on average at least 66,240 square feet of land, more than 75%, 60,000 square feet of the existing requirement for lots in the Water Resource Protection District, 80,000 square feet, as required by Section 240-66C6. The Planning Board finds that lots 31 and 32 were held in common as of January 1st, 1981, being part of Lot 6 Land Court Plan 23937-B dated May 21st, 1955, owned by Adamancet Realty Trust since 1967. Lot 6 was divided into lots 15 and 16, shown on Land Court Plan 23937-D, dated January 30th, 1981. And Lot 16 was further divided into the present lots 31, 32, and 33 by Land Court Plan 23937-G, dated January 20th, 1982. All plans referenced above, 1955, 1981, and 1982, show the 3 houses that currently stand there today. 2 houses exist on Lot 31, 1 house on Lot 32, with the 3rd lot being vacant. With this re-subdivision, there will be 1 house on each re-subdivided lot. As a result, there will be no increase in density. The Planning Board also finds that the majority of the house lots in the vicinity are comparable in size to the lots proposed by the applicant, with a majority of available lots within the neighborhood being developed. Land to the west of the Adamancet Road and to the north and south and extending to Hatchville Road have limited development potential. The Planning Board has considered the applicable criteria under Section 240-216. In conclusion, the Planning Board finds the proposed re-subdivision meets the special permit criteria of Section 240-66C6. Therefore, the applicant is afforded the rights and privileges allowed under this section of the zoning bylaw. Conditions. Is it just the one condition? Any adjustment to the lot line shall require a modification of the special permit. I believe that's the only condition, right?
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, discussion. More discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passed unanimously.
Better approve it after reading all that.
Well,
You needed a glass of water plus some wine.
Yeah.
Good job, Bob. That's a lot of reading. Next thing is Planning Board discussion request for covenant release for Silver Point.
If I may, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, please.
We have run across a couple of these artifacts where the Planning Board took some action, a release of a lot years ago, and in various refinancings and reclosings, the closing attorney finds that something wasn't found recorded and things like this. This is one of those instances from 1974 where the board did in fact release the covenant on these lots, but apparently it was not recorded, or they couldn't find a recording for it. So this essentially is a do-over from 1982, I think. So it's not as old as 1974, but we do occasionally have these. We've spoken with the attorneys to make sure that we have the language clear for what they needed for the purpose of their covenant. So in a sense, this is an approval of a lot covenant release that we released decades ago, but wasn't found in the registry. And with your affirmative vote, we will send it on to the closing attorney, and they can record this, and we shouldn't have it again for another 20 years or so.
I move that we certify the release that occurred in approximately 1982 that was never registered.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Discussion,
Just a
sorry.
little discussion first.
Sure.
So at our last meeting, we discussed commercial developments or projects that get approved by the planning board, and having a way to have an engineer or someone track that what is put on the plan actually gets done. So can we have the same thing for this type of, when we do a release, can we put in there that the attorney has to give us a copy that it was recorded? Whoever the requesting attorney is?
I think it's an absolutely great idea.
It should be mandatory.
Now, I know in my previous experience, we have required folks who give us easements and do record, and sometimes those documents don't get recorded. because we give it to the applicant to record those sort of things. So I was thinking we certainly have some sort of leverage to make sure those things do get done. Typically, it's a receipt from the registry showing it's been recorded. And so we can put that into our regs, and if we need to codify it further.
So that could be part of our motion? Adjusted motion?
Amended.
So-
Amended?
So you want to make an amendment to the motion?
I do, I want to make that, we have to get a copy of this recorded release of the covenant.
Okay.
So I guess it is that it isn't totally released until the copy is delivered, until the recorded
Correct.
document is delivered.
Correct.
I accept that amendment.
Okay, I'll second. Did you second it? Oh, okay.
No, I just said I accept
Okay.
the amendment.
I'll second the amendment.
Any
Cool.
further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Good. Okay. Next meetings, we're going to have to talk about a couple of things. September 11th is, do we have a meeting in September 11th?
We
don't
do,
have any-
that's our regularly scheduled meeting.
Regularly scheduled meeting.
Correct.
So we don't have on the agenda tonight, but we usually talk about future agenda items. Does anyone have any future agenda items? Okay.
We have our regular ones.
Yeah, the ones we use, the standard, we have a group of them that are on every meeting, and they're gonna stay there. Yes, Pat?
Yeah, well, we've got homework assignment with the recodification. I think it would be advisable if we started discussing our comments. So I would suggest that,
So we'll keep that on the agenda all the time.
yeah. I think we
Okay,
need
so
to-
we'll add discussion of recodification. You don't think we can do that?
No, no, sir. I was just going to say, I'm much better at doing my homework when I know it's due.
Yeah,
So I think if, to your able-bodied vice chair, if we say, do your homework and have a report for September 11th, I think we're much more likely to make some progress on that, if that's what you were
I think that was
thinking.
your
it
point.
was what I was aiming for, yes.
Sounds good to me. Okay, that's good. On September 18th, we have a joint meeting with the Affordable Housing Committee. And at that one, I think we'll have, Paul, do you have something to say about that?
I'm just curious why the Affordable Housing Committee meeting has been set up. We talked about meeting with the health department, the health, a number of times, and we really haven't discussed.
Well, the main, I guess I should have brought out the reason, there is a priority. There's a housing, they have an update for the housing production plan, and it's gonna be discussed at that meeting. And that's why it's, I should have mentioned that that's the special topic that they're bringing forward.
Jim?
Yep.
Doesn't that housing production plan need planning board approval?
Yes, it does.
Yeah,
Well,
okay.
it certainly needs planning board consultation as well. And if I may just put in one more plug for the housing production plan, there is also on October 16th, the second public forum for the housing production plan that's being scheduled for the Herman.
You're stealing my thunder, that's next on my list.
I
Right here, you gave it to me. Yes, Charlotte.
Before you move on, it's affordable housing / home-based code, what's the conjunction there?
Why combine them?
No, no, I am giving, it's on the agenda, I'm gonna try to give a PowerPoint presentation on form-based code. I've shared it with
Right.
you already, and I just thought it was something that I've been working on, and I wanted everybody to be speaking the same language. And then once we agree to that, then we can have further discussion on it. I basically have been doing a lot of work, going to the Form-Based Code Institute, reading everything I can, going to Mashpee, and I put together a PowerPoint presentation. It's very short, and it'll take me about 10 minutes, and we'll lay it out, and then we'll have a discussion on form-based code. It's more language-based, than anything else. What is it? Why? Not, what we're going to do, but just what is form-based code?
At which meeting?
It's gonna be on the 18th.
I'm just curious why you don't do that on the 11th if you're ready, rather than combine it with the housing.
Because Tom put it on the 18th.
Well, we had talked about when we might do that, and not knowing what sort of business we might have come over the threshold by the 11th, I wanted to sort of plug it in while we were talking about housing, because as we saw from our discussion with Union, the Union Point Group, who was here talking about the resiliency by design and some of those design capabilities, it's one of those things that's sort of in that same venue of moving the ball on the design by resiliency, looking at what is medium density that we talked about in those peripheral areas for the Davis Straits. So I thought that it had an applicability for housing, and particularly we talked about affordable housing, because what we've talked about over and over again is it's difficult to create affordable housing one house lot at a time. So I think that the form-based code discussion helps to inform how some of those things can be done. And thought since we had sort of a scholarly night talking about this sort of stuff, we might try to put those things in there. But clearly, we're very flexible. The chairman sets the agenda.
I'm ready, so I've had it ready, so if, I'd rather do it sooner rather than later. I think Paul's brought up a good idea. Yes?
I'd rather you do it on the 11th, rather than doing it during the affordable housing meeting.
So
personally.
you're agreeing that
Should
Paul
bump it up.
suggested be done on the 11th, so you're
Yes.
agreeing we do on the 11th?
Yes, I am.
I thought the two of them made a good link, because
Well, I think they do, but I think it would be better to do one, and then we'll have that as a background when we're going to the
Exactly.
next one. It'll be a learning curve and a step that we'll
I agree.
take, little steps. This is a really big change, and then we're talking about little steps. So I think it'd be good for all of us as a team to be on the same page on that language before we get into, so I can answer questions that are brought up on other things.
Right, so
Is it
as
okay if we do it on the 11th?
Absolutely. To quote my favorite Yul Brynner line, so it is written, so it shall be done.
Yes.
We will put it on for September 11th.
So along with that discussion is how does this rewrite of our bylaw fit in as we move ahead with form-based zoning? Because there was something that was a little off-putting to me to think about taking all this new zoning language to town meeting and also going to town meeting with form-based zoning. Not that we would do it at the same time, but that's a lot for anybody.
Except I don't think, I'm not envisioning doing form-based code across the whole town on everything all at this one shot. I don't think that's something we could do at this time.
I agree.
I think the form-based code, once we agree we want to do it, we're going to apply it to one area first, like maybe Davis Straits, and have it only be in an overlay district and not be a part of the entire rewrite. So
All the more reason why we need to talk about it, so
Right.
people don't
So-
think they're
right.
talking about it townwide.
Right. But that's difference between discussion, what it is, and implementation. Charlotte?
Bob and Bob said very, very clearly that the intention here is a two-step. And the first step is clarifying what we already have. That's the recodification. And that makes a really substantial foundation for the change, which I heard as change to form-based zoning. Did you hear it that way?
What, just now with these?
Yeah.
I didn't
You
hear
said
that at all.
This was to make, I think I'm quoting him, a substantial foundation for the changes yet to come, so that we take what we have, because they're not changing the bylaw in the sense that it requires new things. They're just making it easier to understand and use.
I understand that.
Yeah. So it's to make that substantial foundation in order to make the change. It's very hard to take this confused big thing that's grown over time and convince people that, gee, you're not losing very much when we change to this other completely different thing. It'd be easier from a clear document to make the leap forward. So
I'm agreeing.
Yeah.
We're all in agreement.
I agree, I just didn't hear them say anything. Did I miss something?
Well, I think we were more speaking about the form of the bylaw.
That's what I
Yeah,
thought.
I think it's more the form of the bylaw and not going to a form-based code.
Exactly.
And
That's
the
what I heard.
form-based code that we're talking about is going to start off as an overlay district in one section, not all across town.
substantive foundation for a new bylaw. That was part of his, that's the goal.
Yeah.
That the recodification is a substantive foundation for a new bylaw.
Absolutely.
But I don't think he was thinking of form-based zoning in that.
He doesn't need to think of what the new one is, we do.
It doesn't preclude it.
I think
Oh,
that'll be
no,
one of
not
those
at
work
all.
sessions that we're going to be having.
Let's get through
Okay.
our presentation of form-based code and then have a discussion on what we're gonna do with that after, or even if we want to do it.
We're waiting for you.
I'm ready.
Yeah, I'm ready.
I'm
I'm ready
ready.
for you to do it.
I'm ready.
We will have it on September 11th.
Okay, then the next item on the agenda is for the 25th. We're gonna try to deal with all the warrant articles in one night?
Well, we'll open the hearing that night. I don't believe there's any requirement to close the hearing.
Okay.
So the hearings will open on September 20th.
We'll open them all and we'll keep them open until we close them out over the next month.
That's how I would typically do it, but I'll be following the lead of the board.
So how frequently are we going to meet? When's town meeting?
Town meeting is November 13th.
So how many times are we gonna meet in October?
I would venture to say we're probably going to have 3 meetings in October.
Is everyone gonna be around the whole month? Everyone available?
Yeah.
No?
When do our recommendations have to be in for the warrant?
The warrant closes October the 31st. That language needs to be in before it's advertised with the town clerk's office. So I'm drafting things right now. So I don't know exactly the answer to your question, but
Okay.
my deadline for having drafts for discussion is that Friday when the ad drops. Because when the ad drops and it says people can take a look at the text, then those things have to be in substantial form at that point. So I have permission to stay late a lot tonight, over the last few weeks, to get things done.
I was just wondering, because at some point, we have to, if we want our recommendations published in the warrant booklet, have our recommendations done, and we have to have had the hearings, and I don't know what the schedule is.
Yes, and I have to go back and look at that.
Yeah, I mean, you handed it out, but I don't have it with me.
I don't have it in front of me now. So yes, it is going to be a busy fall.
Could I ask questions at this point?
No?
At any point?
Not now, we're into our agenda. Sorry,
No questions?
not open to the public, no? That ends our agenda items. That means I need a motion to adjourn.
Too early. It's not even 8:30.
Need a
This was a
second.
great article.
Second.
Oh, no, we actually, we're adjourned. Thank you.